there's just this disconnect between what the publishers wanted readers to read and what readers wanted to read.
They never had a relationship with readers. Publishers sell to bookstores that sell to readers.
The publishing houses don't do that much marketing or don't put that much money behind marketing. A lot of it is kind of finger in the air. Let's see if this works.
I think one thing that I've felt and experienced over and over in my career, books sell because of word of mouth from people you trust.
Hey, Matt, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lily.
So excited to chat. I like to start way back at the very beginning because I think it's interesting to hear people's personal stories and how they kind of inform the rest of their lives. And I imagine you probably have a lot from your childhood that's informed this kind of career decision and business of yours. But tell me, where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburb of LA called Thousand Oaks. I was a very nerdy, bookish child, which is probably no surprise. My mom was an English teacher in middle school, and so her love of books probably infected me, but not my siblings for whatever reason. I just was really drawn to it and read a lot as a young age and played a lot of video games too, and found a lot of solace in reading, and that's just been a part of my life and personality for as long as I can remember. And it wasn't until college that I decided to kind of focus on it more seriously, but that's just been intertwined with who I am my whole life.
What were you reading as a kid? What were your favorite books or series or authors?
Yeah, I remember reading all the same stuff everybody probably did in elementary school, like loving like Goosebumps, and then reading Lord of the Rings. I remember bonding with my dad over Dune. He loved Dune and had me read it, and I remember loving that as well. And then more into like middle school, high school, I started really devouring like all the things in the house, which was a lot of Stephen King and Anne Rice and Michael Crichton and like not super literary stuff, but like I just remember loving it and could not get enough. And then it was in high school in like high school English classes that I started reading more literary work, and that actually kind of intersected with me coming out as gay. And I had a friend, my first person I came out to, who was also a big book nerd, and we would go to West Hollywood to a different light bookstore and just like be around other kinds of books. I remember finding Giovanni's Room in like the back of the bookstore. I'd heard of James Baldwin and like knew that he was like a really important author, but had no idea he was gay. I remember getting that book and reading it, and it kind of like opening up this other world. This was like the 90s, and so there wasn't that much media out there. And that really put me on this path towards like consuming everything I possibly could. So by the time I got to college, it was sort of obvious. Like all I wanted to do was just read books. And like, that was my way of understanding other people in the world in a bigger way.
Giovanni's Room was also somewhat really informative for me, just so beautifully written.
Really?
And there's a new biography on James Baldwin that's like the first biography that's come out in like 30 years. Maybe you've seen it, but it's all about all these people in his life who he had really meaningful, deep relationships with that kind of impacted him and his personal life and career and whatnot. So super interesting. That was one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Is I'm curious, what do you think are sort of the themes and stories that may have not existed when we were kids? I think we're around the same age, that are being told and shared and published today. Like, how do you think the books may be different?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when I was first thinking about Bindery, and one of the first influencers I ever approached was Kevin Norman, who is this like very outspoken, gay, like focuses on a lot of gay books, was like passionate about Song of Achilles. And his audience is really young. I remember thinking, like, if I was in high school and I saw somebody like that and was introduced to those kinds of books, and there's so many more of those kinds of books now that are like geared towards young adults, like that would have been so wildly eye-opening. Like I think my sense of the world in the 90s was like, there weren't really gay people, and then there was AIDS, and then I was from living in that world right afterwards. And that's part of where Giovanni's Room was so interesting, is it's still like a sad story, but it was like, oh, there was this whole world that existed and has existed, and you sort of learn about the history and what it felt like to be alive in those periods, reading a lot of those books. And now there's so many more books for different kinds of people. Like there's so much
Hmm.
more. I think there's always been books written for diverse audiences, but did they get published to the same magnitude? Could they reach their audience? Like probably not. I think there's much more. I think publishers are often, as part of where Bindery comes in, like behind the ball on what people actually want. But they're seeing it now, and there's more being published to those audiences, and I think there's more books you can find now more easily that speak to you and your experience with authors who share your experience with protagonists who are going through what you've been through. And that's like the great joy of reading is when those connections, you're feeling something that you felt but never articulated. And when you come across those moments, it just makes you goosebump. And that's, I think there's more of that now, almost to the point that it can be really hard to like figure out what's right for you amidst like the deluge of books being published in all kinds of genres. But that's the value that these people have kind of brought into the space is you kind of find the people whose taste you love and they bring into the books you love, which is how it's always been. I had my friend in high school that's like one person who was introducing
Hmm.
me to books versus, the hundreds and thousands of people you can find that really match your taste and your sensibilities.
I think about I have so many reactions. One is I think about for a long time, and you can tell me if publishing is starting to change, but I think it's starting to change with businesses like yours, is there's just this disconnect between what the publishers wanted readers to read and what readers wanted to read. And I think that goes from, diverse stories and diverse voices to even just like categories. I think about how romance was really poo-pooed as a category for so long. And now it's just like massively popular. I think it's the number one fastest growing category. But
Yeah.
the publishing industry wanted people to read serious books, intellectual stuff. And maybe things are finally changing because obviously there's like business decisions at the end of the line. But I think about that so much. Like even as a kid, I loved like Nancy Drew books because I thought to myself, oh, I could be her. She's the ultimate kind of Renaissance girl woman. And now there probably are a lot more role models I could find in books. I mean, I still could, but you know what I mean as a kid.
Yeah, I think it's so true and it's really interesting. I mean, first of all, I think when I worked in publishing, I spent time with a lot of different publishers. One was Farrar, Straus and Giroux, and like it's this really prestige literary publisher. But you look at any bestsellers they have in their file cabinets, and like a lot of books on the bestseller list were really commercial.
Hmm.
What's happened? I think how publishing still works and used to work. Is they never had a relationship with readers. Publishers sell to bookstores that sell to readers.
Hmm.
Publishers, I think, really own this ability to get books covered by media outlets. My first job in publishing was as a publicist. And so I could name all the book review editors at all the top 100 daily newspapers in the country until like I saw firsthand all those people got laid off. And so the whole system has always been really detached from what readers wanted and was always kind of reactive when you'd see something work. And that's where you got these kind of copycat books. Like my When Gone Girl did well. There was like a million books that had the word
Hmm.
Gone or Girl in the title because they're just sort of copying what people want. But, that in the world we live in today, that has a lot of room to change. And publishers, I think, are still really reactive. Um, and are still trying to figure out what readers want. I was actually at Amazon when self-publishing first launched, and I was on the books team, and the disconnect between the books that were selling from big publishers versus the genres that were clearly on fire in self-publishing was wild. Like romance was huge, especially going to erotica. Like people want that, and they read a ton of that, and I think publishers have been a little averse to it, or like think it's smaller than it is. Like urban fantasy was this huge thing.
Hmm.
And so you see these new genres bubble up and kind of get created as people kind of think about things differently. Romantic is a good example, like the merging of different kinds of genres and tropes happening organically, and then publishers now kind of poaching the people they're doing well and then like uncovering these genres, but still fundamentally being disconnected from the readers whose tastes you would think should be driving all the decisions that happen at a big publisher.
The self-publishing world is so interesting to me. Obviously, don't know nearly as much as you do, but I think about so many of these people, like Colleen Hoover comes to mind, where like she couldn't get started and she self-published either her first or first two books, and obviously then got like discovered and blown up. But the discovery piece of it, which I think you are also sort of trying to solve for, of like amplifying voices who may not be found or may not have an introduction to Random House, which is still, again, these like very closed exclusive businesses and industries, which we'll get to. But there's so many good writers and voices out there. And the question is, how do you find them and how do you give them a platform, which you're doing?
Yeah, there's so many examples, and they've been happening ever since the origin of self-publishing. Of clearly publishers were wrong, and like some of these books, like you think about Andy Weir and like the hard science books and 50 Shades of Grey. Like there's so many examples of self-publishing uncovering massive hits that have really changed culture. And then the big problem with self-publishing is there's a couple. One is as an author, it can cost a lot of money. So there's kind of a gate to the people who can afford to do the right kind of editorial and design work and publicity and marketing work that was often required to have a product that people will enjoy and have it reach readers, which isn't always true, but can be really true. It can require a certain type of author. I think the authors who do best with self-publishing are incredibly entrepreneurial to the point of like being influencers in their own right. Like you kind of have to be an influencer and now have a big social platform to do well in self-publishing. And that is amazing for the authors who are wired that way. And in my experience, most authors are not.
Yeah.
I feel deeply they shouldn't have to be. Like you shouldn't have to be an influencer to
Yeah.
have your book get seen. And then the third is you still can get into bookstores, and bookstores still matter. I think the hand selling at bookstores and indie bookstores and being face out and being discovered serendipitously, it all matters. And I think that what that's meant is big publishers that are like looking to see who's rising in self-publishing, and then they can give them a bigger platform and get them more distribution. But we know, and we just know this to be true, that there are so many great stories out there that because the author lacks the money or lacks the platform, are just out there and like could find a lot of love with readers and don't get that chance.
Your point about a lot of writers not being influencers or not sort of being marketers by nature really resonates with me. But as I've learned and kind of getting to know this industry is that the publishing houses don't do that much marketing or don't put that much money behind marketing. A lot of it is kind of finger in the air. Let's see if this works. And I could tell you some funny anecdotes of people I've talked to who are just like, what are you saying? Like, why would you publish a book if you're not going to market it? But I think your point is really salient that it's kind of analogous to like an internet analyst who covers stocks. Like if a stock is covered by 10 different investment banks, it's going to get more attention. If your book gets reviewed by 10 different magazines or 10 different newspapers, it's going to get more, readership in theory and like more purchases. But so much of this marketing thing is sort of either underestimated or underinvested in. And it's like, why publish it if you're not going to put any, juice behind it?
Yeah, I mean that was the power I think of publishing for a long time. Is that was my role. My job was to go and get these books noticed, and that was because I had developed relationships with all of these book review editors at newspapers and magazines, and they were only going to listen to the people who were at these big publishers. That kind of curation chain that was happening meant that publishers could create a lot of value for authors that they were taking a risk on, but that world is gone. And so I think what publishers have shifted to is like, well, they're going to acquire authors who can market themselves and then spray and pray, which works for the publisher because if you get the economics right and you're not paying authors that much, like on the whole, it works because some books do explode, and that's kind of covers your list. For an author, it's a really bad experience because it's like, well, what are you getting if the the expectation is you have to market themselves? I mean, I've heard from authors who have been told by their publisher to spend their advance on hiring a marketing agency. I do have heard this more recently that some publishers are encouraging them to hire their own developmental editor. It's like at that point, what are you doing as a publisher? I mean, you're kind of like greenlighting and getting distribution, sure, but that can be better than self-publishing and your odds of breaking out, but it's still all on you. And it's like my passion in life. It's like, there's just gotta be a better way. There's gotta be a better way. This doesn't feel like the way it should work or could work in the world we live in.
I agree with you. So you were building a very interesting company called Bindery, basically reimagining publishing from the ground up. You're building what I would call Hello Sunshine meets Random House meets book talk, in my own words. But tell people what Bindery is, because I think it's really interesting, and then we'll dive into the different pieces of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core premise of Binder is like, what if you were to build a publisher that had a direct connection with readers, and what could that enable? And so what we have is a platform where what we call tastemakers, anybody who has a bookish audience, that's usually book influencers. It's also a bookstore or an author. Anybody who has an audience who loves their taste in books can build a direct relationship with their audience, similar to what you would do on a Patreon or a Substack. Where we see communities start to get really big, we partner with those tastemakers to have them launch their own publishing imprint. And the idea is if you have this really engaged community and also some income from like membership through the platform, you can take different kinds of risk. You can publish differently. You can put a lot of energy behind it, and you have direct reach, both to the people that are on our platform and to that tastemaker's larger platform, whether it's on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, or like an email list. Doesn't really matter. It's like, can we have the people who have taste people love and a big audience be the ones publishing books that they love? Because I think that is the thing that at big publishing is different now, is like, the editor should love the book, but a lot of the assessment is, can this author market themselves? Does it look like prior bestsellers? I love the idea of somebody who has taste everybody loves picking books that they truly love. And that's resulting in books that we publish, I think, feeling kind of different, being genres that seem like mashups or have like pitches that sound almost unmarketable and then resonate really strongly with readers. And it's been really fascinating to see when like us as a publisher aren't making the decisions around what to acquire. These individual tastemakers are, what that results in terms of the books that get released.
I love that point about books with like genre mashups, because I think going back to publishing, I feel like I'm being such a hater on the publishing world, but that's why we're here, so it's okay, and it's my podcast.
I love everybody who works in publishing. I think it's like a systemic thing. The system is just not wired, I think, for the future's heading of it. The people I love, these people
Yeah,
deeply.
yeah, for sure. Um, is, this idea that you kind of had to give a book to a publisher, like we're sort of alluding to, like in perfect condition, like it's done, the editing's done, the marketing is baked in with your, audience or followers, XYZ, it's just going to go to market. They're going to like hand it off. It's going to be super easy and straightforward. And I think that lends itself to categories as well, right? Okay, it's like, does this fit into one clean cut category, like romance or sci-fi or, fantasy? But this mashup thing is interesting because I could see publishers being really confused by that and being like, whoa, we don't know what bookshelf we want to put it on, right? And so I think
Yeah.
that's really cool that you're taking bets on things that may not seem so obvious. Tell me about some of the things that you're publishing coming up. Which ones you can't tell, which one's your favorite, but which ones are you excited about that you're publishing soon?
Oh my God. There's one book that is trending really well for this fall called Recipes for an Unexpected Afterlife. And it's a cozy fantasy book, which is a genre that I think was coined by the tastemaker who's publishing it. And so it's really interesting that there's this tastemaker called Meg Hood, and she has a social presence called Meg's Tea Room. And she wears almost like a kind of Renaissance fair outfit, and she's like serving you tea and book recommendations. And it's meant to be really soothing and cozy and sweet. And this is her first book under her imprint, which is a really big deal. And it took her a while to find it. But this book is about an undead orc who gets to kind of finally retire from fighting to open his own restaurant. And it's really sweet and really cute. It has a lot of cozy hallmarks, but it also has some like real grit and real world building and some real action. And so it's like not perfectly in line with a lot of other cozy books like Legends and Lattes. And it just does something different, which is what she was looking for. Where I think a lot of publishers are trying to like find the copy of the thing that's working. I think a lot of these tastemakers, they're putting their name on it. They want to find something that pushes the genre forward. And so that one is trending really well. The other part of it's really sweet is the author, Destin London, it's self-published before, has a tiny platform, a really adorable social presence. He's like the sweetest man in the world. And after she shined her light on him, he started to go really viral. He's almost as big as she is now on social media. And so there's this kind of like beautiful nurturing that we're seeing happen where these authors get to benefit from these larger platforms and start to build their own as a result. But there's also some other great stuff. We've got like a really, really cool dark fantasy called Cry Voidbringer. That's probably one of the best sort of fantasy books I've read since the fifth season. We've got a book called Local Heavens, which is so cool. It's this queer cyberpunk retelling of The Great Gatsby.
Hmm.
And it's so clever. And the sort of cyberpunk thing is it kind of takes the income inequality and new money ideas that were in The Great Gatsby and like pushes it to a horrible capitalist extreme. And then it takes the kind of like your undertones you'd see in The Great Gatsby and pushes that to an extreme. And it winds up being really like fun in the way you would expect from this sort of sci-fi retelling, but still really literary. And again, it's like a hard thing to shelve if you're a big publisher. Um, but the book is just getting incredible fanfare and momentum and word of mouth. And so you just see these things that like these tastemakers can see it. And it's the kind of book they wish were getting published that I think a lot of publishers, because they use a different rubric for what to greenlight, might not see in the same way. All of these authors either had agents or didn't have agents, but like we're trying to go through the traditional path and we're hitting these walls because their book they were told wasn't marketable enough, maybe it was too dark or didn't fit that cookie cutter criteria. And that doesn't matter for us. Like these authors have tastemakers have their platform. They can use it however they want.
Super interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you about, I can't remember if we spoke about this when we first met, is I know that in the last couple of years, sort of in growing popularity, like books have been optioned to become TV shows or movies or series or whatnot. And that's kind of exploded, including like agents and publishers going back into the archives into books that were popular years ago and saying, okay, this could be really good on screen. How important is that to you, either in the selection process or in sort of like distributing the story? Do you option the rights for the books? How does that work?
Yeah, it's something that we're having a lot of good traction with. And I'll ultimately talk about rights more broadly. And so the rights could involve audio rights, foreign rights to foreign publishers, subscription book boxes and special editions, and then obviously film TV. We've had, I would say, way more success here than we expected. I think the reason for that is all the people who are looking around they're looking to these big tastemakers on social media to see what's trending. And so just hearing about our books, a lot of this has been inbound. We've done dozens of deals now across foreign audio and subscription book boxes. Pretty early on, we got a first look deal with a pretty big production company, which was really interesting. And have a book now that has two screenwriters shopping it around in the hopes of a TV show from from our first season. Nothing's been optioned yet, but we're like, it feels like we're close and um, that's been really exciting. I think that the challenge is what we're acquiring doesn't necessarily meet what studios are looking for, right? Like a lot of these tastemakers are picking what they love, and what they love might be really expensive to produce because it would require a lot of CGI, or it might be like a period piece, which would mean again a lot of effort on the costuming side or location side. And so I think a lot of Hollywood is looking for contemporary romances or horror that are cheap to produce. Um, and we're going to have some of those, but I think that that's an interesting tension we have is I think we can share with the tastemakers what Hollywood's interested in, but it's always like a slot machine. So I would never want them to pick a book because they think it could get turned into a TV show or a movie because the odds of that are always small. That said, in all of our meetings with all of the scouts and studios that we've had, it is clear that everyone is looking to social media to see what's going to trend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see books like Bunny that were this huge competitive auction, and that was a book that really exploded on social media. Same with Fourth Wing, like Son of Achilles. Like all the books that have kind of popped off there have a quicker path to a TV show or movie because studios have the same challenge as publishers do. They want to build an audience for whatever they
Mm-hmm.
do. And when it comes to original work, I feel like the most likely way to have it build an audience is to, you know, go with a book that has a massive fan base.
Yeah, makes sense. I was just thinking as you were talking, and you can tell me if this is dumb, is there also probably are other ways to do things with books and stories that are not TV and film. So I'm thinking like merch, right? So maybe you could create merch as kind of like a first step in figuring out if there's more willingness to pay and another audience for the world and the product without having to make like a multi-million-dollar movie or like a live event or like an amusement park thing, right? There must be other things that people could experiment with if it made sense.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny where we have a lot of people on our platform just kind of experimenting with various things, like making hats and tote bags. Meg Hood partnered with a tea company to do her own line of teas. One of our books had a very like simple but really fun kind of video game made for it of Monsters in
Mhm.
Frames was our first book to hit a bestseller list, and it's just like kind of Monster Mash in space book that's so funny and so unique. And there's a little like kind of space shooter video game that somebody put out to support it. And so I think you're right. Like these books are seeds. They're seeds that
Yes.
become so much more. And so having the network of people and the creativity to make it become whatever it wants to become is just really exciting.
I love that. The tea thing makes so much sense, right? It's just like obvious. You could partner with like Lipton and just go to market in 5 minutes. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, Meg Hood's cliche teas. This partnership is incredible. We did a book box to support recipes for an unexpected afterlife and included some of her tea in it just to like have people open it on social media. And so we're trying to find all the ways to make these books just look and feel delicious when you see them on social media in any way we can.
So cool. We've talked a good bit about tastemakers who are kind of, selecting and getting an imprint to publish these books. But also, I know, building community is a really big piece of this. And so I'm curious, like, what do you think the real role of community is in publishing in the future? And when I say that, I mean like readers deciding what they want to read and, other people that, again, may not have a voice to get their own book published.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this all the time. Like, I think when you think about the companies that represent, for better or worse, what the future of media looks like in other verticals, like you think about journalism and Substack, and you think about like audio and Spotify and Patreon and, obviously Amazon and Apple and Netflix when it comes to film. They're all built with this direct audience in mind, and it's so interesting that publishing still just doesn't have that. And that's been a big question of ours is what happens when you do? And I think that was a really perplexing one for some people at first. Like, why do you have this platform with the direct audience? What's the value of that? And I think we've really seen it come to life in our product.
I want to ask you about what the word author means in 2025, because there's a lot of chatter about AI and people sort of supplementing their writing and their work with tools and software, or even just human editors, as you sort of said at the beginning, or a developmental editor, as you said at the beginning of this. What does the word author mean, and what is it going to mean in the future?
That's a really good question. I think to me, you know, authors have meant the person whose voice is at the heart of the story. I think that will continue to be true. I actually have I have a number of opinions about AI and the role that it might play.
Tell me. I wanna hear all of them.
I my I think a lot of the environmental and like kind of legal copyright issues are very fair and valid. My aversion to how people are using AI for writing stems from how boring I think it is ultimately. Like I think that what these platforms do is they're probabilistic, and I worked on a lot of AI models when I was at a former tech company. Really powerful in many ways. But they are homogenizing. They are trying to predict what it thinks you want based on everything it's been trained on and consumed, which we can already see is having an impact on the quality of writing when it's used. Like everything kind of sounds the same, and like there's a whole funny thing about M dashes being used, and if an author means like the voice at the heart of the story, which doesn't mean that you're not getting feedback from an editor or from a writer's group, but if that is being influenced by these LLMs, I think you run the risk of your voice not coming through and from your writing being really boring. I think we read because we want to feel connected to somebody who had not just the desire to write the story, but to obsess over every word and every choice and make sure that every detail of it and the feedback you get that informs that helps you express what you're trying to express perfectly. And I think I mentioned this very early on with that experience I had in childhood of like that feeling when you read something and it articulates something that you've thought but never put words to, and how powerful that is. And that only comes, I think, from someone's actual voice coming through their language. And I think what AI is going to do in the short term is just create a massive amount of pollution. It's just like going to be a lot of stuff out there. And like, could you have it write Twilight meets Hunger Games really easily? Totally. Of course you can. Will anybody want to read that? Um, Maybe if they search for that exact thing, but that's not how books work. I think one thing that I've felt and experienced over and over and over and over in my career, books sell because of word of mouth from people you trust. Um, Always. And this is very obviously true just thinking about it. Like you have to spend money on it. It's like 8 hours of your life. Um, I think there's some super reading genres, like maybe more on the romance side, where people are reading like a book a day and just like all consuming and Kindle Unlimited, and maybe you can pump some more into that. But most people are reading a book because people that they trust are incredibly passionate about it, whether it's a bookseller, a friend, whoever it is. Um, who's going to even bother reading a book that someone didn't have the like desire to write themselves and get it in their own voice? And so I think through this pollution of just like stuff getting pumped out, which we can already see, the need for like human tastemakers who are doing the work of figuring out what's worth reading, which will often be informed by the story around who's writing it and who else has loved it. Like that human connection that causes books to do well is going to become only more powerful when like the number of books being published is increasing exponentially, but none of it has actually been written or partially written, and doesn't say anything unique because by definition it's homogenous. So anyway, that's I think the author is still the voice at the center of the story, but that voice has to be human for anyone to want to take the time to read it. Because otherwise, it's just like of all the things you can spend your time on, why read something people couldn't be bothered to write?
I agree. I guess, well, I have a couple thoughts. One is there may be books that are either like partially written with AI or like heavily edited with AI, and we just won't know it, or the reader won't know it, right? And so, to your question of if a reader knew it was mostly written by AI, they may be turned off. But if they don't know, and it all seems
Yeah.
pretty perfect, and there's like a human who edited at the end and kind of softened it around the margins, I wonder just what that world looks like. But then I also think, sort of part and parcel to that, a lot about ghostwriters and this idea that, for example, a lot of people, public figures, influencers, media folks who either don't have the time or don't have the capacity, have had stuff ghostwritten for them forever. And the ghostwriter is absolutely never mentioned on the front of the book, in the back of the book, in the middle of the book. And so to me, it's not that different from that, because people always know it was written by somebody else and they still buy it because they want to know the story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I think what's interesting is nonfiction is doing very poorly right now. I think I just
Yeah.
heard something, only 6 books like sold more than 100,000 copies last year, like new nonfiction releases. Because I think the audience for that is shifting more to audio. There's this like desire to read the story from a public figure, like Michelle Obama, for example, like to hear them in your car while you're doing chores. There's such a rise in audio. And again, that kind of comes back to this idea of the voice. And so I don't know if Michelle Obama had help writing her book, but like what I think we'll see as a trend for a lot of nonfiction is it becoming more audio and more like kind of close to how a podcast can feel, where you have that voice at the center. Where the books that people are buying that are ebooks and physical books, and primarily physical, tend to be a lot of fiction.
Mhm.
And they tend to be the kind of book that you want to like have on your bookshelf that's really beautiful, that means something, that like gave you an experience. That's what I think the rise of special editions is, like this thing that you can like cherish. I think interesting for those is the context around them really matters. Like I think that one example is we had a book called House of Frank, and it was this cozy fantasy about grief, which is like sounds like an oxymoron, but the book came from the author's experience of losing her mother. and that is woven into the book in a really beautiful and poignant way, and knowing that changes your reading of the book. And so there's something which people might fake. Like, I can't pretend that we not might not get misled, and it certainly happened in the past. Um, but I think a lot of people read with the full context of who wrote it and why it was recommended to you and what you expect to get out of it as part of their experience. And this idea that we read in a vacuum and you search for like a genre in a book that was AI generated just like tops up and then you consume it. Like, none of that, I think, um, aligns with how people actually want to discover books, read books, and be in community around other people who love the same kinds of books.
I'm thinking a lot about what you said about nonfiction books on the decline and potentially lending themselves better to podcasts. I wonder how much of that is also about like lower barrier to entry, right? Like anyone can have a computer and start a podcast. But as we talked about, to get an agent, to get a publisher, to get a book out the door could take a year to 2 years. So, yeah, who doesn't want to hear Michelle Obama tell her own story on her own platform in her own home, comes out immediately? That makes so much sense to me. But I also listen to a lot of podcasts, and I was looking at, I don't know, something that Apple was featuring is they're almost trying to do the reverse too with podcasts. They're kind of doing fictional stories into bite-sized chunks in episodes. And I wonder how much of that we'll also see as like alternative forms of publishing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, audiobooks are the fastest growing format in publishing. But is where we've had the most success on the right side. There are a lot of people that audiobooks fit into their life in a better way. Like, you're just doing chores around the house, you're driving, you're at the gym, whatever it is, and it just fits better. And for a lot of people too, it fits in a complementary way where when you're at home, maybe you're reading the book, but then the audiobook takes you out where you want to go. The format that's flattest is ebooks, interestingly. Like, those have kind of plateaued and have been plateauing for a long time, where you kind of want the like beautiful physical object and what that means to you and the experience of holding it um and having it embody the story, or you want to like have the ease of taking the story, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, with you on the go. And so I don't see physical books going anywhere, and I'm kind of bullish on what the future of audio looks like, for books, and what that could mean for books being explored in unique and different ways.
Super interesting. Sorry, I have one more thought on the podcast thing because
Yeah,
you
yeah.
probably know the answer to this. Is I'm curious how the economics work differently if you publish, quote unquote, a book on a podcast and sort of your monetization grew with listeners, which grew with advertisers and could move really quickly versus getting sort of a one-time fixed payment from a publisher, maybe hitting that and then getting additional proceeds. Like, I wonder if it's actually easier to monetize if you're a big name or you're a tastemaker or you have a built-in audience to do it the podcast way. Obviously, there's trade-offs, but I wonder how the economics are different.
Yeah, I think that'd be really interesting. Because we sell the rights of our books to audiobook publishers, I'm not as deep into the audiobook publishing economics, to have a lot of authority on it. What I do know is, I was head of product at Patreon before I came to Bindery, and that was a lot of the influence I was seeing. And the amount of money some of these podcasts are making through their direct relationship with their audience is staggering. And what was most incredible to me was they were often in areas I didn't realize were as big as they were. I think that's like, again, that same feeling I had at Amazon when you're looking at self-publishing, and I have a sense of what I think people want, and I'm wrong. That you'd hear of a true crime podcast and it'd be making like $1 million a month or something, from direct payments of people who want more of that content or that sense of community. And that was one of the inspirations for Bindery, is like, I'm not the person who should be deciding what gets published. You want to find these engaged communities, and they have more of a sense than I do, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, have there been any really difficult editorial decisions you've had to make so far? And how did that go?
Oh, good question. I think we haven't had any that were especially difficult. I think one thing that's been kind of interesting is, what is the role of the tastemaker in that? So in our process, we have a developmental editor and a copy editor and a proofreader. and a cover designer, and the tastemaker is typically um, most involved in the cover process. As you would expect, like they have a really good deep sense of what they think their audience would like, and I think their sense is often more relevant than what a lot of like marketers and designers and big publishers are doing, which again is that kind of copycat approach. What we've had to figure out is what should be a role that they play in editorial, because some of them do have notes. They acquired this and there's things they think would make it better. And the way we've handled that, and it's never actually come up as something incredibly contentious, is we have them kind of fill out this almost like questionnaire just to like capture everything that we feed to the developmental editor. And so our idea is we want all of the notes that a tastemaker has, which we think are really relevant and matter, to get funneled through the person who knows how to actually give the feedback and respond and help shape it with the singular voice. I think what you don't want is like too many cooks in the kitchen, having a lot of people involved that might have competing views. You want there to be like a singular person that's able to synthesize everything and make sure the tastemaker's feedback, which is often really good, is incorporated, but then have a person who's guiding the author through making their book the best version of itself.
It makes total sense. It's like getting product feedback, right? It's like you want to solicit as much feedback as you can, but then, the person who's really has the expertise in either bringing it to market or marketing it, whatever it is, they can make the final call. But it's like, thank you for your input and your ideas, because super welcome.
Yeah, it's worked out well. And not to say we might not ever have it. Like, I think that ideally the tastemakers are acquiring the book because they love it and the changes would be minor. And I think if there was a situation where we actually have had this happen, which has been fine. A tastemaker has basically said, I wouldn't want to acquire this, but like it's not there yet, like for any number of reasons. And so we can do a kind of revise and resubmit, where it's like if the author feels like they want to revise it in certain ways, totally open to, and they can resubmit it, and the tastemaker will take another look, which has resulted in some acquisitions to date. But it's not a acquire then force you to change it. It's like, at the outset, be clear about what you're looking for, and if there are elements that are missing, that would get it there.
What is the career background of the tastemakers? I actually don't know. Like, do they have full-time jobs? Do they come from kind of writerly backgrounds? Do they work in totally different professions? Like, what do they do full-time if not a tastemaker full-time?
It is all over the map, and it's super interesting. Like Zoran, who's like, I think got one of the bigger like sci-fi fantasy book clubs on our platform, is a searcher as well. We have people on our platform who work at bookstores. We actually had our first bookstore join the platform as a tastemaker. We have people that work in totally unrelated industries like tech. And this is just like a side hustle. We have people that have worked in or actively work in publishing. And we have people who do this full time. And so it really runs the gamut. And people that do it full time often do a variety of things as content creators. So like Jason Headley, who's one of our biggest tastemakers, also does a lot of content on board games and cozy video games, and has kind of, built up a lot of his audience on his content related to books, video games, anime, board games. They love him and they love his taste across, media verticals. And so it's been really interesting to see people who bring their own diverse expertise into Bindery. And some people, once joining Bindery, commit to being a content creator full time.
Super cool. It sounds like you're a product person at your core. I'm curious, are there any it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a
yeah. It's true.
Are there any features or capabilities you're dying to build, but you think the market might not be ready for yet?
Yeah, there's a couple things that really have my attention, and I don't think I figured out how to execute them well, but they really intrigue me. One of them is this idea of human-powered recommendations, and what I mean by that is I feel like there have been so many startups and tech companies that are trying to solve the "what should I read next" problem, which usually they're trying to solve with algorithms, where it's like, if you've read this, then you should read this. And the reason that often comes up flat is the same reason that it's when my feelings around AI come to bear. It's word of mouth from someone you trust that drives book recommendations. And an algorithm spitting out a book cover isn't that compelling. When I worked at Amazon, we saw this firsthand where that we did all the research. Their recommendation models only work if you'd seen that before and usually had it recommended to you from someone you trust. And so the thing I would love to figure out how to do on Bindery someday is be able to like ask a tastemaker directly, like, is there a kind of book you're looking for? Take a picture of your bookshelf, like a picture represents a vibe, anything like that, and be able to actually get personal recommendations of what you should read next from somebody whose taste you really trust. I want to like replicate that experience you have when you go to a bookstore and you're like talking to a bookseller about something you're looking for, and they're like really passionate. They share a few books with you, and like that is something that is really powerful. And I think that a way of offering discovery that isn't algorithmic but really human could be really interesting. How to pull this off and have it be overwhelming like the tastemakers and like scalable, I think is really challenging. But there's something really interesting there that I think could create a lot of really beautiful kind of like intimate personal moments around sharing something you love with someone who has your taste. So that's something I'm really interested in. And then, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I feel like there's elements of like what Cameo is or what Cameo is meant to be.
Yeah,
Back then, I lended
exactly.
help well to that, right? Where you could pay like $20 and tassel, either a tastemaker, an influencer. Hey, can you recommend a book? That feels pretty similar.
Yeah, there's something when you have like a kind of parasocial relationship where there's somebody who feels like a celebrity to you and you love their taste and like you're hanging on all their recommendations to have them personally of all the books they've read, recommend something based on a mood that you're in or a kind of feeling you want to have, I think would feel so special. And so, again, how to do this and do it right is something that will take time, but it feels like it's so at the heart of what's happening on Bindery. Like, I think at its heart, you have communities of people discovering books together, and that is like the best place to have new books enter. Um, but book discovery is at its core. And so to date, our product, I think, feels like a bookish Substack, Patreon. And where it's going to go, I think, is going to lean more in like a bookish discovery community experience that I think will feel markedly different. And that's the other piece is right now we use Discord as our kind of book club platform. So we integrate with Discord, you chat there. It would be so beautiful to have that in our platform and be specifically bookish. And what you could imagine is being able to tag books to your chat and like have that allow you to then see what other people are saying about that book from not just the content done by any other conversations that are happening, and having community and content and books interwoven feels incredibly powerful and beautiful. And like I think our vision is to have all that happen in a platform that still feels really human. It isn't just trying to push you to more content with algorithms. Like TikTok does that really well.
Yeah.
I don't want to compete with TikTok. I wanted to create something that feels complementary and also deeply human.
Super cool. I would imagine going back to the Cameo thing is like there's a one-to-one element, but then let's say me, Lily, gets pays $20 for a tastemaker to recommend a book. I could also share that on my own Instagram. So then it becomes one to many. And I'm like, oh my God, Matt Kaye recommended me this new book. How cool is that? Right. And so it goes from like one to many.
Yeah, there's a feeling. So one of the people that work at Bindery, CJ Alberts, is our marketing director, but also owns a bookstore. And for whatever reason, her taste is perfect for me. Like she'll just be like, Matt, you have to read Open Throat. And I'm like, okay. And I read it and I love it. And I kind of regroup with her. And there's something in those interactions that are so beautiful. Like this is just like true to culture in general. When someone you respect, whose taste you love, recommend something and then you love it too and you come back to them and like that is joyous. You see that happen kind of organically on social media, but designing an experience around that feels really powerful.
Super cool. Awesome. Matt, it's great to chat with you. Really appreciate this. Where can people find Bindery, buy the books, and follow what you all are doing?
Yes, you can go to binderybooks.com to experience our platform. You can also follow us on Instagram or TikTok. And our books are available at bookstores everywhere. And so you can see what they are on our website, but we are in all the bookstores. Go read them. They're really good and special and different, and I could not be prouder of them.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much.